Caleb, I want to set this up for you because you wrote the column about the 3-3-5 defense or the 3-2-6 defense. But, Will, let me first start asking you this. Has Josh Heupel with a 3-down look been figured out?
I would say no. He is not. You have to adjust, and he really doesn't seem to want to make the adjustment, or he doesn't feel comfortable with his quarterback making the adjustment. If teams are going to do this to you, you kill them with swing passes, you kill them with short wide receiver screens, you pick up 7-8 yards at a time, you make them bleed to death slowly, and then they will get out of that, and they'll start spreading things out, and they'll start pressing at the line of scrimmage. Because it's not just to me that they're in a 3-3-5. I do think the offensive line struggling with odd fronts and things like that of who to block. But part of it, too, is they're just keeping the DBs 8-10 yards off the line of scrimmage saying, your guys aren't going to run past me. And Tennessee doesn't have the speed to be able to do that. So I think there are easy fixes for this for Tennessee. We saw it in the Florida game. We saw that first touchdown drive, short, quick pass to the outside. They marched right down the field. It opens up running lanes. Like Bill Walsh wasn't wrong 40 years ago when he said, you can also create running lanes for yourself by stretching a defense horizontally, not just vertically. To me, that's the fix for this, and Tennessee won't do it because they haven't been disciplined enough offensively, I think is what it is. Sometimes you just take 5-7 yards and you keep moving the chains and you stay on schedule. Everything doesn't have to be an inside zone run for 4 to 6 yards and then a 30-yard splash play, but for whatever reason, man, again, they're kind of doing it like the retirement fund that I just made the joke about. It's like their entire offense is like playing scratchers or something like that, or pulling raffle tickets, like saying, oh, let's get this splash play downfield. You'd like those, but when defenses are going to key on taking that away, to me, you have to attack them. It's all sports is about attacking space. Josh Heupel's a smart guy. Now, maybe Nico is not great at getting the ball out that quickly. He seems to make decisions pretty quickly when it comes to when he runs and things like that, or he has until the last couple of weeks. He looks a little more confused. But I don't think it's that it's been figured out. I think it's that Tennessee hasn't been disciplined enough to combat those teams going to the 3-3-5 and 3-2-6 right now.
Okay, so Caleb, here's basically what Will said. Will said, as far as your column, that
that's crazy.
No, he didn't say that. But defend your column here, because this 3-3 goes back a while, Will, and I think you'll find this interesting being an X's and O's guy.
Yeah, so Will, I didn't think about it until like just yesterday. It kind of hit me, like, when did this become a thing for Tennessee? So, do you know the first 3-3-5 or 3-2-6 base defense Tennessee faced under Josh Heupel?
I don't remember, no.
It was Austin Peay last year after the Virginia game. Scotty Walden runs it. He's now running it at UTEP, who, by the way, Tennessee plays this year, funny enough. Remember coming after that, Tennessee actually had a really good opening win against Virginia. They looked really good. They had dominated Clemson back in the Orange Bowl. And remember the Austin Peay game, how ugly that was? And we're like, oh, all the Joe Milton issues are back. And then, okay, they lose to Florida because Cooper Mays is hurt. They lose to Alabama because it's Alabama. They're kind of rolling. And then out of the blue, in November, they see it again. Because Missouri, which hadn't run the 3-2-6 base all year, drops it against Tennessee and holds them to 7 points. Then coming into this year, Dylan Sampson just straight up admits they weren't prepared for the look of the 3-3-5 that Arkansas threw at them. They look horrible. I mean, I want to point this out too. The last thing, random dude on Twitter, I'm going to give him credit. His name is Raj Hines. He only has 6 followers, so this isn't like a serious, like I'm not like taking what he says as gospel, but the fact that this was actually said in 2021 is relevant. When Heupel was hired, there is a tweet in the ether right now that says Heupel's offense couldn't adjust to Tulsa running a 3-3-5 defense when he was at UCF. That was 3 years ago. And Tulsa did beat Heupel and UCF twice. Isn't it fair to say this is really a thing? It's starting to look like a thing, Will. I'm sorry it is.
Well, I would say it's look, I am a New York Giants sheep, and so I believe Bill Parcells, you know what I mean, I'm pretty sure that there's a gospel of Parcells coming out at some point in time in the next edition of the Bible. But I look at what Parcells did was, I'm going to take away the thing that you want to do the most. And what Belichick did was say, I'm going to take away the thing you want to do the most while strengthening the interior, the center of my defense. I just think that the one thing that Heupel has to adjust. He doesn't want to, but he has to. And to me, that's the issue. There's still ways to attack a 3-3-5 within this offense. Now, the way you don't do it is right up the middle or with an inside zone run or all the way at the boundary, like at the sidelines. There, you have all of that space in between to go pick up 3, 5, 7 yards every single snap, and they won't do it. And to me, that's where I come back to the discipline side of this. I think I agree that 3-3-5 gives them trouble, but there are still ways to attack that. Tennessee just doesn't seem to want to do it. And against Arkansas, they moved the ball, short, quick passing. And against Florida, the first touchdown they had was short, quick passing. They didn't do it again until we got into overtime, and they went right down the field. So to me, that I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying there still are ways for Heupel to attack them within this offense. But to what you just said, that the guy tweeted with 6 followers, he wouldn't adjust. He has to adjust. That to me is what it comes down to at the end of the day.
I agree. And I think he's got to knock you out of that 3-3. And there were times that I thought Tennessee did that against Florida, and that's when they were able to take their deep shots. But how would you break them out of a 3-3? Just rely on the run, rely on 12 personnel, which I'm told by people within the program, well, it's not that easy. It seems that easy to me.
Well, I would get Dylan. I would go 2 backs. That's what I would do. If you see what Mississippi State did this past week, they went to a 21 personnel, and they attacked the seam with 1 tight end or kept the tight end in a block. They went to 2 backs. That way you can have one of those backs out in the flat. That's what I would do, is just make sure I always have a back in the flat, running that tunnel screen. And I'm going to do it to death until you stop it, until I've spread you out. If you remember New Mexico years ago when Brian Urlacher was there and they ran that was the first place I ever saw a 3-3-5, right? Was New Mexico with Urlacher. And that's how you beat them, was you just attack the flat over and over and over again. Wasn't necessarily that you attack the perimeter. And I do think this, in Heupel's defense, his wide receivers ought to be able to beat corners one-on-one and coverage on the outside. And but some of the routes I think that they have designed, I have a huge problem with the routes Tennessee's running as well. Why are you doing all these double moves, long drawn out stuff? I don't understand the thought process of that. Your receivers aren't very good. Your tackles can't block, and your running backs their weakness for the running backs is being able to stay in and pass pro. So I think Tennessee's playing to weaknesses when it comes to that, looking for the splash play. But there still are ways to attack that it seems like Tennessee won't do. But I will say I'm going to give Heupel a little bit of a break on it this way. There was something years ago. I'm sitting there, and you know how it is, Dave, whenever you're doing the SEC teleconferences. Caleb, I'm sure you know, you're just sitting there listening to these coaches ramble and all that. And Hugh Freeze starts talking about the Ole Miss people just crushing Hugh Freeze when he was there. And they were like, what? And he was like, okay, there is specifically one player on the defensive side. And he said, what y'all don't know is that his mom's going through cancer. And so whenever you see somebody struggling when they're a young person, you got to ask the question, what's going on with them? And so I'm not saying Nico's going through cancer or anything like anybody like that, but I do wonder, is there something behind the scenes? Because I'm not at practice every day. There have been times that Rick Barnes that has said things to me where I'm like kind of killing him about doing something. And he's like, well, that kid's dealing with this right now. And then I'm like, oh, okay, how about I shut up? So I do wonder, are some of the struggles going on personally with dudes that maybe is there something he's seeing? Hey, Nico can't do this. He isn't a guy that can get the ball out quickly. Alabama right now, their biggest problem, I would say the disease for Alabama offensively right now, is that Jalen Milroe can't get the ball out of his hands quickly. It takes him a little while to process what's going on. And so he kind of can't run what Kalen DeBoer wants to run. And he couldn't run it last year, and they would have to change the offense at halftime. Alabama would, and that's why they would be 2 different teams, first half, second half. He couldn't run the West Coast stuff because he couldn't get the ball out of his hands quickly enough. So I do wonder, are there things with Tennessee's team that they can't run that way? Do you have receivers that can't get inside leverage whenever whenever if they were to run short routes? Do you have tight ends that are, like, is Nico struggle on a drag route? Little things like that you could do to attack this that Tennessee's not doing. On the surface, it looks like a lack of discipline from the play callers. On the other hand, he could know, my guys can't do that, so I have to do this. Or remember the Lane year. When Lane, we're just like, why in the world aren't you just get Jonathan Crompton the heck out of there? That guy's going to, he's tearing up more turf than he is doing anything else out there as a quarterback. So, and then Lane, everybody on that staff, Jim Chaney, those guys said, no, he's got it in practice. So maybe there's something that's not making its way into the game that they're seeing in practice that could develop at some point in time in the future. But I do think right now, I don't understand why you're not doing the thing that works against these these stack defenses, which is attack them in the flat all day long until they get out of it.
Now, and I think there are two issues at play that we've alluded to. One, obviously, is offensive tackle, right? And two is the fact that Tennessee has not chosen to throw over the middle, which I think shows a lack of confidence in Nico Iamaleava. So let me ask you which of those are the biggest factor. If I can, real quick, I want to tell you that today's tough question brought to you by Banks and Jones. Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks and Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. All right, Will, so the bigger concern, is it the offensive tackles or the fact that Josh Heupel apparently doesn't feel comfortable enough to throw it over the middle frequently with Nico?
I think it's the tackles. That's the biggest concern. And again, maybe the tackles are the place where he's seeing things in practice that aren't translating them to the field. I think there's some problems with the tackles. One, I have been told enough behind the scenes that those guys, because if you remember fall camp, there was every single day Campbell's not playing, Hurts not practicing. They're in a brace, they're in a non-contact. That those guys might be out of shape, and you can't go tempo because they're out of shape right now. And it's some of the things that I've looked at where they're getting smoked. Had somebody tell me yesterday that, okay, like these holding penalties aren't like this one. It's because they're getting smoked, right? Because they're just getting beat, and they're just grabbing and grasping and doing whatever they can. And I had it brought up to me that, no, man, it's because they're tired and they're exhausted. So they're out of shape right now from not being able to practice during fall camp the way they should have, the way the rest of the team did.